Iran's final stand. Sovereignty, strength, and the power of voice. What happens when a nation refuses to kneel? When centuries of pressure, isolation, and war fail to silence a people's truth? This isn't just about Iran. It's about every voice that's ever been suppressed. Every people who stood alone and said, "We will not break." In a world shaped by power and manipulation, one country dares to choose independence over obedience, identity over imitation, and courage over compromise. This is more than politics. This is soul, struggle, and survival. This speech is not for the passive. It's for the awakened. For those who seek truth beyond headlines. For those who feel the pulse of resistance in their blood. For those who understand that real strength comes not from domination, but from defiance. Stay with us till the very end. Because this isn't just Iran's story. It might just be your story too. Let the world listen. Let the truth rise. This is Iran's final stand. Iran's history is one of profound resilience, spanning thousands of years that has witnessed the rise and fall of dynasties, the collision of civilizations, and the constant tug-of-war between imperial ambition and cultural pride. From the ancient Achaemenid Empire to modern times, Iran has stood at the crossroads of power and philosophy, often targeted but never truly conquered. The Mongols came with fire and sword, the British with manipulation, and in the 21st centuries, the Western powers used sanctions, coups, and isolation. Yet through each chapter of adversity, Iran found a way to adapt without surrendering its identity. The 1953 CIA-backed coup that overthrew Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh was a pivotal moment, exposing how deeply foreign hands tried to shape Iran's destiny. But even that blow didn't erase the Iranian spirit. Instead, it seeded a deep-rooted skepticism toward external influence, a wariness that lives on in the national psyche. The 1979 Islamic Revolution wasn't just about religion or politics. It was a scream for self-determination, a collective act of reclaiming ownership over the nation's voice and future. While other nations crumbled under similar pressures, Iran transformed resistance into renewal. In the decades that followed, Iran faced punishing sanctions designed to isolate and weaken it. Its economy suffered, its people endured hardship, but the state didn't collapse. Instead, it cultivated internal strength, invested in education, developed regional alliances, and built a formidable defense infrastructure. This was not mere survival. It was calculated persistence. Iran's scientific community progressed under embargoes, its artistic culture thrived underground, and its political resolve hardened. The world watched, expecting implosion, but Iran endured. This resilience is cultural as much as it is political. The Persian language, poetry, traditions, and social bonds have remained intact through centuries of external disruption. While many empires erased the heritage of those they conquered, Iran's identity not only endured but influenced its invaders. It absorbed and transformed what came its way without losing its soul. Even today, young Iranians read Rumi and Hafez while navigating modernity, proving that resistance is not only found in protests or weapons, but in preserving memory, spirit, and voice. Iran's story is not one of passive endurance. It is an unbroken dialogue between its past and present, a defiant heartbeat in the face of erasure. Iran's insistence on sovereignty over submission is one of the most defining elements of its modern political identity. At a time when many nations are pressured, whether through economic coercion, military intimidation, or media narratives, to align with global power structures, Iran has chosen a far more difficult road: autonomy. This choice hasn't been without cost. The global powers, particularly those in the West, have long demanded compliance with their vision of order and governance. But Iran, drawing from a deeply rooted history of independence and self-rule, has repeatedly rejected that demand in favor of preserving its dignity and self-determination. Following the 1979 Islamic Revolution, Iran charted an entirely different course from that of many other Middle Eastern nations. It severed ties with Western dominance, nationalized its oil resources, and structured a government that, whether criticized or admired, was undeniably its own. This act of redefining itself on its own terms positioned Iran as a symbol of defiance. It was not simply rejecting a political system. It was rejecting the notion that any foreign power had the moral or strategic right to dictate the terms of its existence. In doing so, Iran sent a clear message to the world. Sovereignty is not negotiable. This stance has drawn intense international pushback. Sanctions, political isolation, sabotage operations, and constant media vilification have become part of Iran's daily geopolitical reality. Yet, despite the mounting pressure, Iran has not abandoned its principles. Instead of surrendering to external demands on issues like nuclear development, foreign policy, or regional alliances, it has doubled down on its right to decide its own fate. Whether agreeing or disagreeing with its leadership, one cannot ignore the unwavering position Iran has taken against the politics of submission. Iran's choice of sovereignty isn't just about politics. It's an assertion of identity. It's a stand rooted in a belief that a nation's path must be written by its own people, not imposed from the outside. The refusal to yield to foreign interests has become a central part of Iran's national narrative, one that views resistance not as a tactic, but as a duty. In a world where smaller nations are often expected to fall in line with superpowers, Iran's posture is both disruptive and inspirational, challenging the hierarchy of global obedience with the simple yet powerful declaration, "We will choose for ourselves." The global discourse surrounding Iran often reveals a deep and persistent pattern of double standards, particularly from Western powers that claim to champion democracy, freedom, and human rights. These principles are frequently used as justifications for international interventions and policy decisions. Yet when Iran asserts those same ideals on its own terms, it is met with condemnation and hostility. This contradiction is not incidental. It is foundational to how power operates in the international system. Iran's refusal to submit to Western-designed frameworks and its pursuit of an independent path have placed it under intense scrutiny, sanctions, and vilification, despite actions that are no different from those taken by favored allies. When Western-aligned nations develop nuclear technology, assert regional influence, or restrict foreign intervention, it is often portrayed as strategic or necessary. But when Iran does the same, it becomes an existential threat. This inconsistency exposes a key truth. The problem is not Iran's actions, but Iran's independence. The world has watched as countries with poor human rights records are embraced and supported because they serve geopolitical interests. Meanwhile, Iran, despite having a complex but functioning democratic system with elections and civil society debates, is treated as an international pariah. The question is not whether Iran is perfect, but why it is judged by a different standard than others. The narrative of Iran as a rogue state has been shaped as much by media and political agendas as by facts. Coverage often lacks context, omits history, and erases the legitimate grievances Iran holds from decades of foreign interference. The same Western powers that criticize Iran for its resistance to liberal values are often those responsible for destabilizing the region through wars, coups, and alliances with authoritarian regimes. Iran's challenge is not just in defending its policies, but in confronting a narrative architecture designed to delegitimize its voice. By asserting its right to self-determination, Iran has exposed these global hypocrisies. It stands not only as a state in resistance, but as a mirror held up to the world's moral inconsistencies. The pressure Iran faces is not solely because of what it does, but because it dares to do it outside the approval of those who see themselves as the arbiters of legitimacy. In doing so, Iran threatens not just the balance of power, but the illusion that the global order is based on fairness rather than favoritism. Iran's greatest weapon has never been found in missiles or military strategy. It lies in its voice, in the power of its narrative, and in its ability to shape perception beyond borders. In a world increasingly governed by information, images, and global storytelling, Iran's refusal to let others define its identity is itself a powerful form of resistance. For decades, Western media and political establishments have attempted to craft a singular narrative of Iran as dangerous, irrational, and oppressive. But Iran has continually pushed back, asserting its own version of truth, rooted in culture, history, and national dignity. From poets and philosophers to journalists, filmmakers, and diplomats, Iran's voice has penetrated beyond propaganda. Despite censorship and constraints, Iranian art, literature, and cinema have captivated global audiences, often portraying a far more nuanced, deeply human, and complex image of Iranian life than Western headlines would suggest. These cultural exports have served as tools of soft power, challenging stereotypes and offering the world a glimpse of the Iran beyond geopolitics. A nation of thinkers, creators, families, and dreamers. This storytelling is a strategic and moral tool, one that undermines the simplified image often presented in foreign media. Is also political. It speaks not only for its own people, but for a broader global community that resents the dominance of a few powerful nations over the many. In its speeches at the United Nations, its diplomatic efforts, and its regional alliances, Iran has positioned itself as a representative of defiance against hegemony. This position has earned it both enemies and admirers, particularly in the global south, where many nations relate to the struggle of resisting imperial dictates. Iran's voice challenges the structure of who gets to tell the story and who must simply listen. The battle Iran faces is as much about narratives as it is about economics or military force. In the modern era, controlling perception is a form of control itself. Iran's insistence on telling its own story, no matter how distorted the global echo chamber becomes, is a refusal to be silenced. It is a recognition that in the long war of legitimacy, the pen and the voice can be mightier than the sword. What Iran has mastered is the ability to speak from its wounds, to frame resistance not just as strategy but as identity, and to remind the world that even under siege, the power of self-expression is a sovereignty of its own. Iran's internal strength has often been forged in the crucible of external pressure. Each wave of adversity, whether through war, sanctions, diplomatic isolation, or covert attacks, has not fractured the nation but instead drawn its people closer together. Unity through adversity is a defining trait of Iranian society, a deep-rooted cultural instinct that transforms suffering into solidarity. When the outside world attempts to divide, isolate, or destabilize Iran, the result has often been the opposite, a surge of national pride, resilience, and collective purpose that strengthens internal bonds. The Iran-Iraq War is a prime example. Lasting 8 brutal years, it was one of the most devastating conflicts in modern Middle Eastern history, and Iran stood largely alone. Yet, it was during this time that a powerful national consciousness took hold, one that fused survival with sacrifice. Families gave their sons to the front lines, communities supported the war effort with everything they had, and a sense of shared destiny emerged. This unity did not dissolve after the war. It became part of the nation's emotional and psychological fabric, reinforcing the idea that hardship can be endured if the people remain united. Sanctions, meant to cripple Iran's economy and cause public unrest, have often backfired. While they have undoubtedly inflicted economic pain, they have also prompted innovation, self-reliance, and local development. In response to being cut off from global markets, Iran invested in domestic production, scientific research, and regional partnerships. These adaptations were not just policy decisions. They were collective efforts that brought scientists, farmers, businesses, and everyday citizens together in pursuit of a common goal. In many other countries, such pressure might have led to fragmentation. In Iran, it led to greater cohesion. This unity is not blind loyalty. It is rooted in a shared experience of being targeted for defiance. Iranians may disagree internally on politics, reforms, and leadership, but when external threats loom, ideological divides often give way to a unified front. The concept of a "we are in this together" is not just rhetoric. It is lived reality. Iran's history has taught its people that disunity invites domination, and that resistance without cohesion is futile. This collective memory fuels a society that may be diverse in thought, but is bound by the instinct to protect its sovereignty and identity when challenged from the outside. Iran's present-day defiance is not only about the survival of a nation, it carries a message aimed at the future. In every speech, every policy decision, every act of resistance, Iran is broadcasting something larger than itself. That the right to self-determination, culture, and identity is worth defending at any cost. This message echoes beyond its borders, resonating with nations and people who feel marginalized, threatened, or overshadowed by global superpowers. Iran's stand has become symbolic, a living example of what it means to say no to dominance, even in the face of overwhelming odds. The significance of Iran's stance reaches developing nations, resistance movements, and communities that have long endured foreign intervention or exploitation. For many, Iran represents not perfection, but perseverance. Its struggle reminds others that dignity does not require victory in every battle. Sometimes it is the mere refusal to surrender that inspires. Iran's endurance through wars, economic sieges, and diplomatic isolation sends a clear message. A nation's value is not measured by its acceptance by the powerful, but by its commitment to its own path. This example plants a seed of courage in other contexts where submission is often seen as the only option. This voice from Iran also forces the world to reevaluate its power structures. If one nation can resist the collective pressure of dominant alliances, then perhaps the global order is not as fixed as it appears. Iran challenges the assumption that global legitimacy flows only from Western approval. By charting an alternative path, socially, politically, and ideologically, it opens the possibility for others to explore their own models of governance and development, unshackled from imposed frameworks. In doing so, it disrupts a system that has long relied on uniformity as a form of control. Iran's resistance is thus not just a defense of its sovereignty, it is a call to others to awaken. It reminds future generations that the right to speak your truth, even when silenced by many, is an act of revolutionary courage. Iran is not standing for the past. It is carving out space for alternative futures. Its defiance is a declaration that history is not finished being written, and that even those cast as villains by the world's loudest voices can become symbols of a new kind of strength. One that speaks, endures, and refuses to vanish. Iran's stand is not merely political, it is deeply human. It is a story of a nation that chose sovereignty over surrender, resilience over fear, and truth over silence. Through centuries of invasion, coercion, distortion, and pressure, Iran has refused to be erased. It has not just survived, but asserted its right to shape its destiny with pride, principle, and power. In its defiance lies a reminder to the world. Dignity is not granted by superpowers, it is declared by the people. And when a nation finds its voice, no force on earth can silence it. As we reflect on Iran's journey, we must understand, it is not only Iran's final stand. It is a call to every soul, every land, every movement that dares to resist injustice. It is a message that no matter how dark the night, those who walk with truth will always walk toward the dawn. To everyone watching, listening, and feeling the weight of these words, thank you for opening your heart to a voice that refuses to fade. May this message spark strength within you. May it remind you of your own power, and may it inspire you to stand tall wherever your truth lives. Good luck in your journey, and always remember, your voice is your power. Never let it be taken. Thank you.